أخلاقنا بالحلم وافتح بيننا وبين قومنا بالحق وأنت خير الفاتحين ثم أما بعد. Inshallah, I will be your guest speaker again after 2 weeks from now. On January 13th, I'll be giving khutbah al-Jum'ah and a long lecture, inshallah, at night. We'll be discussing more about the different rules of zakah since the month of Ramadan is approaching and coming soon. As of tonight, it's just a kind of appetizer to the topic, as they say, regarding Islamic Finance 101. When you hear the term Islamic Finance, it might come to your mind that this is something that we, the Muslim community, or the Islam as a deen, came up with, something like brand new, was not practiced before. And this is absolutely incorrect. The main principles that we embrace and we practice as Muslims are the same principles that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed on Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, and he did the same with Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. So Islamic finance actually is the Jewish finance. Islamic finance is the Christian finance, believe it or not. When we say Islamic finance, and I will give some examples. When we say Islamic finance, it should come to our mind that you should not get involved in any project or any partnership or any business that is harmful to the society, to the conviction and the ethics and the values of the society, to the environment, right, to the health of humans. It goes without saying that this is something should be avoided. When you hear Islamic finance, it should come to your mind that there is an ultimate level of transparency between the contracting parties. Every single one knows from day one what he or she is supposed to do and what he or she is supposed to get in return. So there is nothing called ambiguity or vagueness. Everything is clear. One of the main principles of Islamic finance is the lack and the prohibition of interest, riba. Riba actually has to be avoided. And as I said just a few seconds ago, this is not something new. The prohibition of riba actually was clearly mentioned in the Quran, was clearly mentioned in the Torah, was clearly mentioned in the Bible. We do actually, have a concern regarding the authenticity of the Bible that people read nowadays. But regardless, if you read in the Bible, you will see a lot of verses where Isa alayhi salatu wasalam and the disciples as well were warning their community from dealing with interest. The Torah actually the same. We do not have the original Torah, but the Quran actually is the one who told us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited the Jewish community from dealing with interest. You read in the Quran, when Allah Azza wa Jal was criticizing one of the Jewish communities in the past, He said, وَأَخْذِهِمُ الرِّبَا وَقَدْ نُهُوا عَنْهُ وَأَخْذِهِمُ الرِّبَا وَقَدْ نُهُوا عَنْهُ. And they used to deal with interest while they were prohibited from doing so. So if you want to focus the most on the prohibition of interest, well, that's something common in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam as well. We do not have any issue, Muslims, when it comes to the prohibition of interest. Everybody actually knows that riba is haram, usury, interest, whatever you want to call it. The problem that we are facing, or the challenge that we are facing here, what kind of interest we are referring to from one side, and how to navigate through the system here in the USA and find out what are the interest-bearing transactions to be avoided and what are the interest-free transactions to be conducted. Well, let's start with the definition of riba. Sometimes you might like to get some self-education. You just grab a fiqh book and start reading about riba. And instead of understanding more, you will get more confused. You read examples, for example, riba is like when you trade barley for wheat, right? When you trade rice for sugar, when you trade orange for apple, and so on and so forth. Those examples actually are correct, but they are very irrelevant to our society. They are very, very irrelevant and outdated examples for us Muslims living in the USA in 2022. We do not exchange barley for wheat. We do not exchange apple for orange. When I want to get some apple, I will just pay for it cash money or using my debit or credit card, and so on and so forth. So those examples actually are correct, and they belong to a certain category of riba that we do not experience nowadays. What kind of riba we are referring to? Like from now on, when we say interest, we are referring to a certain category in which its prohibition is agreed upon between the madhahib, all the madhahib. Whether you're a Hanafi or a Shafi'i or a Maliki or Hanbali, doesn't make a difference. Right? Riba is riba. That riba actually is the most severe one, is the most prohibited one, and its prohibition, as I said, is something that's agreed upon. Sometimes they call it riba al-jahiliyyah, sometimes they refer to it as riba al-diyun, riba al-jahiliyyah, riba al-nasiyah. Forget about those big names. I mean, do not confuse yourself. Okay? Definition of riba that I want you to remember from now on is the following. I'm going to say it slowly. It is the premium that has to be paid by the borrower to the lender, along with the principal amount, either as a condition for the loan or for the extension of its maturity. One more time. It is the premium that has to be paid by the borrower to the lender, along with the principal amount, either as a condition for the loan or for the extension of its maturity. So we have two different kinds of money here in this definition. We have the principal amount and we have the premium, something on top of it. And we have two different contracting parties. We have a borrower and we have a lender. So we're talking about a loan agreement, right? And that extra money, or that surplus, or that premium that has to be paid on top of the principal is guaranteed, right? Is guaranteed. So the premium that has to be paid by the borrower to the lender, along with the principal amount, either as a condition for the loan, which means that if you do not commit yourself to paying a certain amount, whether a lump sum or one-time payment or APR, and annual percentage rate, from day one, you cannot proceed with that loan. You go to Chase or to Bank of America or to Wells Fargo, for example, and you apply for a $100,000 investment loan, or a business loan, or personal loan, whatever. Okay, and upon approving your application, they tell you that okay, it's going to be a loan with 3% APR, annual percentage rate, right? If you say, well, I'm a practicing Muslim, I'm a religious individual, I don't deal with interest, well, good for you. You are in the wrong place. We do not give money for free here. So if you do not commit yourself from day one to pay that APR, then your application will be denied. This is actually what I mean by as a condition for the loan, in which riba actually is unavoidable. You take the $100,000 for 1 year, they have to be paid back how much? In our example, 103, right? 3% APR. If you want to keep the money for 2 years, that's 106. If you want to keep it for 3 years, that's 109, and so on and so forth. So this is when it comes to as a condition for the loan, or sometimes for the extension of its maturity. Sometimes as an extension for its maturity. It might happen, and it did happen in the past, and it does happen nowadays actually here in the US. People used to lend to one another based on interest-free loan, interest-free. And this is actually something happened in the Jahiliyyah, like before the prophethood of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and even after his prophethood, but before the permanent prohibition of interest. They used to lend to one another based on interest-free loan. You take $10,000 from someone, you pay it back $10,000. Upon the maturity of the loan, when the loan is due, right? Either the lender would approach the borrower by saying, your loan is due. You either pay me in full and you're good to go, no consequences. Or otherwise, if you want to have more time, that would be fine. I'll give you more time, but you need to give me more money. So they introduced riba toward the maturity of the loan. Or sometimes the borrower might approach the lender by saying, amhilni wa azidu, give me more time and I will pay you more. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, based on that, revealed the ayah, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu ittaqullaha wa dharu ma baqiya min al-riba in kuntum mu'minin. So riba in this ayah actually is the interest-bearing loan. Well, believe it or not, more than 95% of the interest-bearing transactions in the USA belong to the interest-bearing loan, belong to riba al-jahiliyyah or riba nasiyah. It's obvious, it is explicit in most cases, and it might be implicit in some cases. The challenge that we face here is not, again, whether or not riba is prohibited, right? The challenge we face here is that how to navigate through the system, how to identify those interest-bearing transactions to be avoided and those interest-free transactions to be conducted. This is because of a very simple reason. You read something in the classical fiqh books and you find something in the real life. In the real life, you come across certain charges. You either charge other people or you are charged by other people. For example, there is something called late fees, something else called overdraft charge, something else called penalty, commission, honorarium, interest, what else? Cash, what do you call it? Can you remind me with some terms? We said penalty. We said penalty, overdraft charge, late fees, cash back, like when you use your credit card, right? What else? Interest, commission, and so on and so forth. And most of us do not know whether this certain charge is the riba that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited or not. Now, in order for us to determine, we have to investigate further. We have to pause a little bit and just think about this transaction. If it is proven that someone is advancing or giving money to somebody else, and that principal amount is guaranteed, and the return on that amount, okay, the return on that amount is guaranteed as well. You want to call it interest, call it premium, call it surplus, call it whatever you want, right? If the principal amount is guaranteed and the profit on top of the amount is guaranteed as well, that is the riba that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited, and it has to be avoided. Now let's do some like case studies or exercises if you wish. Okay, let's discuss the example of opening a saving account. Opening a saving account, not checking account, saving account, right? I do have $10,000 available to spend or to lend, and someone actually is asking me for $10,000 loan, right, for 1 year. And I told him, listen, I'm willing to give you the $10,000 loan, but you have to pay me back $11,000 by the end of 2023. So this is like a straightforward interest-bearing loan. Am I correct? I'll give you $10,000 for 1 year. Now we are in December 2022. By the end of December 2023, the total amount paid back, whether an installment or one-time payment, right, it's going to be $11,000. Are you okay with that? And you said, yes, I'm okay with that. So this is actually a case or a scenario where the principal amount is guaranteed and the return on the principal or the premium on top of it is guaranteed as well. Am I correct? Now, what if I change my mind and instead of giving my brother here $10,000 interest-bearing loan for 1 year, I decided to open a saving account with Wells Fargo, right? And based on the agreement between me and Wells Fargo, I will be opening a saving account with $10,000, and they have to pay me back $11,000 by the end of 2023. I'm giving just random numbers, right? Do not quote me on that. So $10,000 will be deposited with Wells Fargo in a saving account, and they have to be paid back how much? $11,000 within 1 year. Now my question to you here, is there any difference between me lending you the $10,000 and getting it back $11,000 versus opening a saving account for $10,000 and receiving it $11,000? If you just zoom out and look at the outcome result, is there any difference? Principal is guaranteed, right? And the return on the principal is guaranteed. The premium on top of it is guaranteed. There is no difference between the two. This actually makes it clear that opening a saving account is equivalent to an interest-bearing loan. When you go to Wells Fargo to open a saving account, no one actually will be telling you, especially like the loan officer or the banker or the customer service representative, whatever. He or she will not be telling you, listen, this is an interest-bearing loan. No, they look at it from a different perspective. And our perspective as practicing Muslims is completely different. Okay, what you are looking for is how guaranteed the principal, how guaranteed is the profit. Again, you want to call it profit, call it revenue, call it interest. We do not care that much about the terms that you use in the agreement. And this is, like something, by the way, should remind us with a very famous fiqh maxim in Islamic transactions, okay, or قاعدة فقهية. That fiqh maxim goes: العبرة في العقود للمقاصد والمعاني. العبرة في العقود للمقاصد والمعاني لا للألفاظ والمباني. What matters in transactions is the essence and reality, not the wording or the formality. So we do not care, that much what kind of terms, okay, you use in the contract. Okay, you tweak the contract, you remove interest, you put profit or revenue. We do not care that much about. What we care about is the essence and the reality of the agreement. If we can deduct someone giving money to someone else, and that money is guaranteed, and the return on that money is guaranteed with no risk taken by the money advancer or the financier or the lender, then that's the riba that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibits. Whether you call it musharaka or mudaraba or partnership, call it whatever you want. We do not care. Right? Back to our example. Opening a saving account is equivalent to an interest-bearing loan. Is equivalent to an interest-bearing loan. And thus, by default, opening a saving account is not a halal option for Muslims. Let's take another obvious example. Mortgaging homes in the US. Again, before you jump to a conclusion here, you need to pause a little bit and try to unlock the secret of the deal or the transaction. When I mortgage a house, what does that mean from a fiqh perspective? How many transactions or deals are involved in this process? We do have 3 different transactions are conducted almost simultaneously. There's a sale agreement. Okay, when I approach the landlord and ask him or her to buy his house for $1 million in California, right? So this is a sale agreement. And of course, I do not have $1 million to pay. So I would go to a mortgage company or a bank applying for a loan, right? Upon the approval of my loan, the bank or the mortgage company would issue a check, okay, on my behalf, payable to whom? To the landlord, $1 million, right? And the third agreement actually is the rahan or the mortgage one. In order for Wells Fargo to guarantee their money or secure their money, they put a lien on the property. They mortgage the property, right? We do not have any issue with the sale agreement. Okay, وَأَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who permitted sale. We do not have any issue whatsoever with the mortgage agreement. When someone is involved in a loan, right, he or she does have the right to ask for a collateral. Someone asked me for $500 loan for, let's say, 1 week, and I do not know that individual. Can I ask him or her to give me his watch or his phone to keep it with me as a collateral until he comes back and give me the money? Yes, I can do that. That's something, by the way, mentioned in the Quran itself. وَإِن كُنْتُمْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ وَلَمْ تَجِدُوا كَاتِبًا فَرِهَانٌ مَقْبُوضًا. Rihan means mortgage. So we do not have any issue with the mortgage contracts according to the Quranic terminology, according to the Quranic definition of mortgage, which is rahan. And we do not have any issue with the sale agreement, but we do have an issue with the loan agreement, because that $1 million will never be paid back to the mortgage company. 1 million. It has to be paid back maybe $2 million within the next 30 years. So we ended up having a sale agreement, halal, mortgage agreement, halal, interest-bearing loan, that's haram. When we have one deal, like one segment of the deal, that's clearly prohibited, that one component of the deal is more than enough to ruin the whole deal and to make it a restricted or a haram one. That's why, by default, mortgaging homes in a very traditional way is not an option for practicing Muslims in this society. Now, what is the alternative? What do you think about the Islamic mortgage companies? This is completely different discussions. Like in this very short talk, we are just establishing some fundamental basic rules about interest, how to understand it and how to unlock, the secrets of those interest-bearing transactions. Let's take something relevant to real estate again. You want to do like owner finance. How about that? You want to purchase a house, owner finance, between you and your, let's say, non-Muslim neighbor. And again, he's asking for $1 million cash, okay, spot sale for the house. And you do not have $1 million. So you ask him, is it okay for you to finance the house for me? In-house finance, there is no third party. You will not be walking to Wells Fargo and apply for a loan. He said, yeah, you're a non-Muslim neighbor. If you're unable to pay me $1 million for like a spot sale for the house, it's gonna be $1.2 million, okay, for 30 years. After like doing his math, he calculated, the interest that he want, and he was asking for $200,000 on top of the principal, on top of the $1 million, right? But that is an owner house. Owner finance. Now, if you proceed with this deal, while he's mentioning clearly that $1 million price and $200,000 interest, can you proceed with that deal? Are you committing riba or something haram? You are not. You are not. Because number one, there is no loan agreement. You are not borrowing money from anyone, right? This is a sale agreement. This is a sale agreement. And it is okay actually in the Islamic finance system to have two different prices for the same commodity based on the payment arrangement. So the house cash for 1 million, the same house 1.2 for 30 years, that would be absolutely fine. So if you proceed with that deal, you are not committing anything wrong. Well, what if you decided to go to Bank of America or to Chase or to Wells Fargo and borrow that $1 million and pay it to John Smith, right? And you get back to Bank of America with $1.2 million within 30 years. Is it the same? No, it is not. Here in the second scenario, you are borrowing money from a third party. You are borrowing money from a third party. But in the first scenario, there is no borrowing activities to start with. It's just a sale agreement with different prices. Something else, and I will stop after that. How about the cashback that I just mentioned? What do you think? Cashback. What does it mean, cashback? You have your own credit card. You purchase, some items for $100. Because of the cashback policy that they have, you receive $5 back. So you end up paying or borrowing $100, and you pay it back to the credit card company how much? 95, right? Is this the riba that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited? What do you think? If you borrow $100 and you pay it back 105, then you as a borrower, you are paying more than what you have taken. So there is a premium on top of the principal. But in this scenario, you are paying less. You borrow 100 from the company and you pay it back how much? After like receiving $5, you pay it 95. So cashback actually is completely the opposite of riba. You see, because actually you as a borrower, you pay less than what you have borrowed. Examples actually go on and on. Maybe one more example quickly. Let's say that you have only $1,000 available balance in your checking account, right? And you have a debit card. You stopped by a point of sale and you purchased an item for $1,200. How about that? You have only $1,000 in your checking account and your debit card, debit not credit. And you purchased an item for how much? $1,200. Most probably, the transaction actually will go through. Transaction will go through. And you find in the next bank statement or online statement that you have to pay back the $200, right? And on top of that, you have to pay another $35 overdraft charge. So if you want to interpret what happened from a fiqh perspective, it means that you borrowed $200 from the bank. Am I correct? Because actually you have only, at that time, you had only $1,000. And you purchased an item for how much? $1,200. So someone actually paid on your behalf $200. It's not a gift. You have to pay it back, right? Now, if the only thing you have to pay back is $200, then there is nothing to worry about. The problem here is that on top of the 200, you have to pay how much? $35. Again, random numbers. That $35 overdraft charge is by default, that's the riba that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited. You can easily argue that by saying, oh, this is an abnormal transaction, it needs some processing, and that, costs money. That's absolutely, understandable. But the default rule here, and again, we are here tonight just to establish some fundamental basic rules of riba, how to understand or how to process any contemporary transaction to find out whether or not it is a riba-based one or not. By default, since you have to pay more than what you have borrowed from the bank, that extra amount actually should be counted as riba. And as I said, examples actually go on and on. To summarize, maybe someone might say, why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited riba to start with? If you go to Bank of America again and you take $100,000 for 3% APR, okay, you make money, you upgrade your business, and you make 10-15% profit, right? You pay the principal and 3% to the bank, and you keep the rest for yourself. So it's a win-win situation, okay? You are happy, the bank is happy. Why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibiting riba? Well, that's a very good question. The scenario that I just mentioned is not the only scenario that takes place in the real life. Sometimes you borrow money, okay, to establish a business or to upgrade your business, and you do not make 10% profit, you make 100% profit. Sometimes 500, sometimes 1,000% profit. And it's absolutely unfair for the bank to take only 3% like profit or interest, whatever you call it, on top of the principal, and you keep the rest for yourself. There is a lot of injustice actually involved here. Now, the other extreme example is that when you borrow that 100,000 and something happened, like back in March 2020 when the pandemic started hitting and just freezing the economy here in the USA. A lot of people actually borrowed money. They were unable to make profit, unable even to break even, right? They just incurred loss. They lost the principal. And there was absolutely no negligence, no carelessness, no misconduct or mismanagement from their side. It's just, just act of God, as they say. Okay, natural disaster, pandemic that freezes everything in the USA. By the law of the land, the bank does have the right to go after those borrowers, asking them for the principal and for the interest as well. And this is absolutely actually implements a lot of injustice and exploitation. And our answer to our fellow Americans, why interest is prohibited, because whenever interest is implemented in any society, in any economic and finance system, it brings a lot of injustice and exploitation, okay? And the main reason behind sending the prophets and messengers is to establish justice on earth. Justice in worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, justice, okay, when you treat yourself and deal with yourself and with your family members. Justice is to be implemented whenever you deal with other people in the society at large. And that's something actually has been captured in the Quran itself. لَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رُسُلَنَا بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ. We have sent our prophets with the clear signs. وَأَنزَلْنَا مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْمِيزَانِ. And we sent with them the book and the scale. Al-Mizan. Why? قَالْ لِيَقُومَ النَّاسُ بِالْقِسْطِ. So people actually will stand for justice, will implement justice. So riba is absolutely against the principle of justice that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to embrace and to apply. As I said, this is just an introduction to the topic. Inshallah, I will be your guest speaker on January the 13th, which is the second Friday of the next month, inshallah. I will be giving khutbah al-Jum'ah, and there will be a long session on Friday night. Inshallah, we'll be having more time to discuss further. And inshallah, we'll be touching on the zakah issues as well. Zakah on stocks, zakah on retirement accounts, zakah on the salary that you receive, long-term investment, and so on and so forth. Thank you so much for giving me those 30 minutes talking to you. And inshallah, I will be seeing you after 2 weeks from now. Jazakallahukhairan, sallallahu ala Muhammad. Thank you so much. Yeah, Actually, I need maybe 10-15 minutes to explain, so if you can keep it on hold. But basically, actually, it is halal. I mean, if you want like a very short answer, life insurance is halal. But I need to explain, inshallah, next time when I come. Sure. Sure.
I enjoyed your talk. I guess the second time I listened to your talk, I listened to it at the Epic Masjid with Dr. Jazakallahukhairan. I had two questions for you. During that conversation, as we know, currency is a store of value and a way of transacting, right?
A medium of exchange.
Medium of exchange. And with fiat-based currencies, everything goes to zero eventually in the history of mankind. So Dr. Jazakallahukhairan raised an important question about inflation. And you answered it by saying that there's a peg between gold standard and fiat currency. Right? And then I think you didn't get into it. So I have two questions. Number one, if you use that as a basis for saying that...
Sister, the real estate agent, I mean, you still have questions, right? Yes. Yeah, give me just a few seconds. Let me finish with the brother. Yeah, go.
Could you explain how there's justice and fairness with talking about inflation in this mix? And the second question was,
let's have like one thing at a time. When it comes to inflation, okay, basically in the Islamic finance system, loan is not a mode of finance. Loan is not a mode of finance, and that's like the complete opposite of the economic and finance system, which is the capitalist one that we are experiencing here in the USA, actually global-wise. The main job of any bank is to lend you money with interest. Am I correct? Whether you go with personal loan or investment loan or student loan, whatever, their main job is to give you money for interest. Period. Are we on the same page? If you go to an Islamic bank and ask for money, okay, for investment purposes, for business purposes, they would say, well, you are in the wrong place. We do not give you money to start with. So if we go with this practice that loan is an act of charity, loan is an act of devotion. I can give you $10,000 if you are in desperate need for the money. You want to pay for the tuition fees of your kids, you want to pay, the rent of your apartment. You take $10,000 for a few days, few weeks, maybe a few months, right? And a part of that devotion is me, the lender, incurring that inflation or that loss or decrease in the purchase power, right? I cannot actually ask for the value of the 10,000. I can ask for the $10,000 regardless of the purchase power, right? Whenever the Islamic finance implemented correctly, that problem actually will not rise to start with, because people will never be lending one another for business purposes. Okay, you get involved in murabaha and musharaka and ijara and different Islamic modes of finance, and giving money as a loan will not be there, and consequently eventually there is nothing called inflation to worry about, if that makes sense. Maybe you can discuss it further.
It's a very academic answer, and when you live in a society that's majority non-Muslim, the fact of giving a loan and being part of devotion is not practical.
Well, yeah, that is the no.
Because all this sounds great on
طيب.
paper, but implementing it in practice. My second question is, what is your opinion on the Al-Hazar fatwa regarding loans? I don't know the details of the fatwa, but someone had explained to me that in that fatwa they're even making the purchasing of bonds legal, which I didn't understand. Are you familiar with that fatwa?
No.
Thank you.
No, sorry. Yeah, good.
Yeah, just like follow up on the same question, which is about the time value of money. Like right now, the dollar, what you can value the dollar, 1950 is not the same like 1970, it's not the same like right now. And we live in, there is a lack of Islamic financial infrastructure. So we don't live in an Islamic world. So, but the value of, like if the bank loaned me $1 million and then 30 years later, ask for the same $1 million, then and we know that the dollar is depreciating. So with the time value of money concept, that means the loan, I mean, there's some kind of justice to the bank. I know they don't do it out of charity, but there's in the same time that the concept of the time value of money. This is like what I got from his question. Same thing. He said, what I mean.
طيب أخي, I'm going to keep it, well, that's a long topic, but I'm going to keep it brief. We are not actually responsible for the bad consequences of the capitalist economic and finance system. Okay, so if they do cause the damage in the society, they have to rectify the damage and find a solution for it, not us Muslims. See, so to justify riba, to say, okay, this is the reality that we are experiencing, that there is a lot of riba. Well, the main job of banks is to give money with interest. Now you need to find, as an Islamic finance specialist, find me a solution for this problem. Well, I did not create the problem to start with. So you're asking the wrong person to find a solution for a wrong problem. If my principles were applied, that problem will not be rising, will not be appearing or existing to start with. Whenever the Islamic finance principles implemented, that problem will not be there. However, to be honest, there are very few cases where the time value is appreciated by the Islamic finance system. One of them actually is the installment sale that we were discussing just a few minutes ago. Okay, you remember the example of a house of $1 million versus like spot sale versus $1.2 million credit sale, right? This is called the opportunity cost. If that John Smith, gentleman, the landlord, has decided to sell that house spot sale to somebody else, he would have been able to make $200,000 profit within the next 30 years. And he is compromising that opportunity to make you happy as his neighbor. So it is fair enough for you to compensate him for that potential loss. That's why we call it the opportunity cost, right? You pay him extra money. However, once you close in the house, that this house is for $1.2 million for the next 30 years. Then once you close, that's it. The house, the price is fixed. It cannot be increased and it cannot be decreased. So this is one of the scenarios where the time value is appreciated as long as there is no loan, right? Now, the third and the last thing, if the inflation is so severe, so much so that the depreciation reached to 33%, right? Then sharing the loss between the borrower and the lender would be very reasonable, right? Like what happened for those people who lended one another before the civil war in Syria, for example, back in 2011, right? Someone gave somebody else 1 million Syrian lira, right? And the borrower actually wanted to pay him back today, 2022. You can imagine like the difference in the purchase power between 2011 and 2022, right? The inflation actually reached, the loss actually, or the depreciation went all the way maybe 95%. In this very particular scenario, when the inflation is so significant, so severe, then we have to actually calculate the loss or the decrease in the market value and divide it between the two. In our example, if the 1 million Syrian lira nowadays are equivalent to only, let's say, at that time, it was equivalent to $100,000 because we need to connect it with a well-established currency, American dollars. And nowadays, its value went down all the way to $10,000. How about that? Difference is how much? 90,000. How much is the 50% of the 90,000? 45,000. 45. The borrower has to pay 1 million Syrian lira plus whatever is equivalent to 45,000 American dollars to share the loss between him and the borrower. طيب, we'll continue inshallah. تفضل. Sure.
Borrowing money from yourself, interest-based, like 401k. If you borrow for 401k, you have to pay it back with interest.
Yeah, they call it loan, but actually it is not. Yeah. It's like a joke, like you take money from one pocket and put it in the other pocket, right? Right. Yeah, it's illegal actually. It's a legal tax evasion or tax reduction, strategy that some people think. Because if you yeah, sure. Because actually when you withdraw from your 401k, that's taxable money. But if you borrow, that's tax advantage money. So to reduce the tax, you just quote unquote borrow. But in reality, you do not borrow. This is your money. Whether the money came from your paycheck or the match of your employer. At the end of the day, whatever you have in your 401k is yours. So borrowing from your 401k actually is allowed. Totally.
Quickly, you did mention about the sales transaction between the seller contract, the
If you directly get involved in facilitating the lending process or getting the mortgage, then yes.
Like you just doing a self-contract, you don't do any loans.
Well, if it is an owner finance, let me take, yeah, owner finance actually would be fine. Sister, go ahead. I'll get back to you. Go ahead. Sure, I understand. Nice to meet you. تفضل. What's that? Sure. Thank you so much. We'll see you inshallah after 2 weeks. Okay, if it is an owner finance one, then you should be fine. It might, I mean, that contract might be contaminated with interest if you add to it late fees. But this is not, something that is significant. Even with the late fees, we can live with it. It's a shart, it's a kind of a clause or a penalty that you have to pay. But it does not ruin the whole contract and make it an interest-bearing one. It is not. That's like a owner finance. It does not involve an interest. That's a huge topic that needs here. So just stay around for 2 weeks, inshallah. I'll come back, inshallah. طيب, last question, تفضل. Yeah, go ahead.
What I was saying, as a real estate agent, you sell your house, and you list the property, and you buy a house, they go get a loan somewhere else, and they come and buy the house. The real estate agent that listed the property is involved with the riba in that case.
I'm not sure if I get your question, I'm sorry.
He's a witness to the transaction, and thus it's in the Quran. It says that you can be a witness, you can be on either side of the transaction, and it's like you're taking.
Well, any kind of direct involvement in processing or facilitating that deal, direct involvement would be restricted, unfortunately.
For instance, you have the house to sell, and you contract a real estate agent to sell the house for you, and they will list the property, and they to look for buyer. Another real estate agent will bring the buyer on the third party, and they bring the buyer and buy the property, and the buyer did not have the money to go to Wells Fargo or Bank of America.
Oh, that's his job. I don't care about him. So if someone wants to buy my house, and I know for a fact that he's gonna apply for a mortgage, yeah, that would be fine. Yeah. طيب, last question, you promise? I have an early flight tomorrow, by the way. I need to.
So, for all my life in the U.S., I've been hearing this issue and the halal weed issue, and it never finishes. We never come up with solutions. We just have more and more talks that let us know that everything that we're doing is haram. Like, basically everything you said, you cannot create any transaction. I can't get a loan for my kid to go to school. I couldn't buy a house. I couldn't buy a car. And then you look at the Islamic solutions of guidance of these other places, and they're very, very. You feel like you're getting the bad end of that. So why is it that we can't find a solution? I mean, there's 2 million Muslims in America. You're still struggling with this. I mean.
Well, we have more than 5 million Muslims in America. We are not standing united for our values and principles. We do have a lot of academic and intellectual and financial resources. We are not putting our resources together to establish our own Islamic finance system in the U.S. This is the bottom line. We can challenge the system. We do not have to penetrate the system because it's hard to be penetrated, to incorporate a genuine and sound Islamic practice within a non-Islamic one. It's close to impossible because of the severe incompatibility between the two different systems. But what you can do as a Muslim is to stand for your principles, is to challenge the system by establishing a parallel organizations that are committed to the Islamic principles of finance. And alhamdulillah, we have a lot of examples. We have several, I'm talking about mortgage, we have several small-size mortgage companies who are operating off the secondary market. They do not sell their contracts to Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. And mashallah, their practice is wonderful.
For asset-based loans.
Housing, for example, here in California, they operate actually off the secondary market. And their contract is almost 100% Sharia compliant. I was the Sharia advisor of this company a while ago, along with Sheikh Salah Hassawi and Sheikh Jamal Zarabozo. They asked us to review their contract and find out what kind of violations or glitches they have. We deducted some of those glitches And we told them they just fix them, and mashallah, they are doing a wonderful job. Because of their limited financial capacity, they cannot serve the whole community at large. They go with maybe 30, 35, 50 maximum houses a year. But this is actually a very good example to follow. Why do not you here in this community establish your own Islamic mortgage company? Instead of us Muslims being quote unquote enslaved by the system and just follow the system and try to find a way to manipulate the rules and to claim that this is an Islamic, well, we can stand for our values and just establish our own Islamic finance system. In the same way that we have a lot of challenges here in the USA, we have more opportunities to grow and to declare our independence, financially, way more than challenges that we are facing. But the whole problem is that we do not have a leadership. We do not listen to one another, right? We are just scattered all over. There is no vision. There is no mission. There is no willingness by the vast majority of Muslims. I mean, this is really unfortunate, to stand for their principles. And that's why very small communities, without mentioning names, are way more influential than the Muslim community, because they stand for their principles. That's the bottom line. I'll see you inshallah after 2 weeks. Jazakumullah khair. We'll talk inshallah.